Sup, guys? I guess I probably should have played the Philadelphia Phillies yesterday, which would have been a win. They did win. But we move on to today. I am going to play one game, and I don't know if I love this, to be honest. I will point out a couple of other things first, that Texas is returning home from a road trip. We have a short Major League Baseball card today on Thursday with a couple of teams moving on to new series, and most of the series today are continuing into their final game. But Minnesota, Texas, and Boston, Baltimore are both new series, and I think Washington, Philly is too. Those series are beginning anew. Texas is the only team returning home from a road trip, I'm pretty sure. They just beat my Red Sox last night, that was just a horrific set of circumstances for the Red Sox. The Red Sox should have won that game. They had held Texas to 2 runs in the first 7 innings, or first 6 innings, I guess it was, and then allowed 7 in the remainder of the game, losing an extra innings, blowing it. Devers had a really horrible base running mistake on an obvious fly ball out. He did not tag up, and he just started going. I think he thought there were 2 outs when there were not 2 outs. There was 1 out, and wound up getting doubled off because he just took off. That was ridiculous. You got to know how many outs there are, sir. And then I was hoping it would come down to Jarren Duran and his return from the really stupid suspension, which he should not have been suspended. He should not have apologized. Let your mouth fly, man. I mean, this is what happens. These guys are adults. This is Major League Baseball. You're in the heat of it. I mean, come on. Worse things have been said as well. Nobody should care. Stop pussyfooting around. Nobody should care about this. Duran returned last night. Red Sox won both games without him. And then in his return, he did have an at-bat in the bottom of the 9th in a tied game. And I was like, hit a home run, walk-off home run. Would have been awesome if he did that, but that was not the case. And the Red Sox bullpen is just a disaster right now. Their bullpen is so bad. Their hitting is not bad, and their bullpen just is blowing everything for them. But whatever, I digress. I am not happy about it. Texas, again, played in that game, beat the Red Sox in extra innings. So they're not in a very good spot, returning home from that, facing Minnesota, who was going on the road after, I believe, losing the final game. Is that right? Against Kansas City? Yeah, Minnesota had won the first couple of games in that series and lost the finale. Minnesota gets to get out of there, go on the road to start a trip. So the situation should be pretty negative for Texas for that reason, because when you return home, as I always say, you tend to get a little bit distracted, having to return to home life and get your home affairs back in order after you've been on the road. Minnesota is leaving home, so they're leaving those distractions behind. So it tends to be a more positive focus spot for that team starting the road trip, because they want to get it off on the right foot, and they do tend to be focused. And it looks like it could potentially be a play on Minnesota. I'm thinking, oh yeah, Bailey Ober, I like that guy. He's really good. I don't know how he was flying under the radar. He's always had really good strikeout walk statistics and good whip and whatever, and people were shitting on him earlier this season when his ERA was terrible, but I'm like, he's good. He'll turn it around. He has done that. The problem is his numbers against Texas are actually quite awful, so I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to play Minnesota, even though the situation is positive. The matchup just doesn't look good to me for Ober, even though he is a good pitcher as well. Texas, I think, hits him at over a 300 clip. I just can't do it. And then Cody Bradford is pitching for Texas on the other side, and he hasn't been bad. He is a young pitcher, and Minnesota has never faced him before, and he's putting up pretty good statistics so far this year. So I just can't do it. I think the pitching matchup would keep me away from that. You could potentially maybe look to an under in that one. I'm not so sure, but I don't want to get involved at all. The number has dropped from 8.5 juice to the over to 8 juice to the over, but it does look like more of the cash than tickets is on the over. I'm not really. Yeah, I'm confused by what I see in the total market on that one, so I don't want to do that one. Speaking of total markets, though, Dodgers, Milwaukee, this is close to being a play for me. I was looking like, oh, man, this looks like a good under matchup here, and the market does appear to be signaling pretty strongly on the under here. It's down from 8.5 juice to the under down to a straight 8, which you can get right now. 87% of the tickets are on the over, because the public, I think, comes in and says, oh, Brewers, Dodgers, both of those teams score a ton. Let's take the over, especially not even really knowing who Milwaukee's pitcher is. And maybe they're even unaware that the Dodgers pitcher is actually good, even though he's a name who's been around for a while. So I don't know how that would get by the recreational bettors, but whatever. The Anyway, whatever the case may be, the over has a ton of the tickets, 87%. 54% of the cash, however, is on the under. So I think there's legitimate movement on the under going against where the public is in this one. And I agree with that, but I do have a couple of issues that make me pause on it, and I don't think I can quite do it. Starting pitching matchup is not the problem. The starting pitching matchup makes me think, yeah, like I want to play an under here. Jack Flaherty is pitching for the Dodgers. He's having a monster season, really. 2.97 ERA, 1 whip. He was with Detroit. Detroit traded him over, and he's been pretty good in 2 starts with the Dodgers so far. A 6-inning shutout, but it was against Oakland. And then took a little bit of a step back against Pittsburgh, giving up 4 earned runs, but he gave up 2 home runs in that game, and he had a 10-1 strikeout walk ratio still in that game. So, but across those 2 starts, he's given up 14 hits in 11 2/3 innings, which isn't good, but 2 home runs kind of hurting him a little bit, 4 earned runs, but a 17-2 strikeout walk ratio. So a really good strikeout walk ratio, really high strikeout rate in his first couple of games with the Dodgers. So that is continuing. He's got really good numbers on the season, 150 strikeouts to 21 walks. That strikeout rate is ridiculously high, one of the highest in baseball, and really low walk rate as well. Really good strikeout walk ratio. 118 and a third innings pitched, and then only 97 hits allowed too. So this is over the course of the entire season. He has been very difficult to hit. All of his stats are quite good this season. So Jack Flaherty, I mean, it looks good for him. And versus Milwaukee, he has good stats as well, except for the OPS. So it's a little bit strange because he holds them at such a low batting average, but has just given up home runs against them. And a lot of his Adames has hit 2 home runs against them, so that's kind of the reason why. So that might be a little bit fluky. So I would tend to lean more towards the batting average in this case versus Milwaukee. He's held them to an 8 for 37 clip, 216 batting average there, but he's allowed 4 home runs, 11-4 strikeout walk ratio. So he has allowed an 833 OPS to Milwaukee, which is pretty high, but those home runs are really factoring in pretty heavily there. Other than that, the 8 for 37, that 216 batting average is good. So he holds Milwaukee to a low batting average. So that's good. And then on the other side of this matchup, Tobias Myers is pitching for Milwaukee. He's a rookie, I believe, and he's having a nice season. 2.79 ERA, 1.08 whip. He's pitching well. He's coming off another nice performance, 7 1/3 shutout, 3-hit shutout with 9 strikeouts and no walks against Cincinnati at home, and didn't get a decision in that one because the offense didn't help him, unfortunately. But he has been really pitching quite well this season, especially for a rookie. He's allowed 4, 4, and 5 earned runs a few times earlier in the season, but since the end of May, he only allowed 4 earned runs in 1 other start, and besides that, 3 earned runs in 1 start, and then other than that, 2 or fewer in all the rest of the starts, which is a bunch of good starts. Since the start of June, he had a 1.44 ERA in June, 2.7 in July, and he has a 0.73 ERA in August so far in 2 starts. Things are looking pretty good for Tobias Myers right now. He's got an 84-24 strikeout walk ratio, which is a decent strikeout walk ratio. He's not a huge strikeout guy. 77 hits allowed, though, and 93 2/3 innings pitched. So he is not easily hittable. Doesn't allow a ton of walks, but he doesn't strike out a ton. But the rest of those numbers are good, man. It shows you that he is pitching well, fooling hitters. And even though we have a really potent Dodgers lineup here, they have never seen Tobias Myers before. So Myers may have an edge. As I always say, when you have a young pitcher that's pitching well like this, and this lineup has to face him for the first time, they have to adjust to him and figure out what he's throwing in a live game scenario. And sometimes it takes a couple times facing a guy to figure that out. So the pitcher tends to have a little bit of an edge early on there. So it looks like a nice underplay here. You could play it under 8. I would probably go, you can get under 4, I think right at -110 right now, I believe, in the first 5 innings. That's probably what I would do because I like the starting pitching matchup here. The bullpens, I don't trust Milwaukee's bullpen that much. Dodgers is a bit better, but the bullpen usage yesterday was a bit much for me to want to come in and play a full game under in this one. Is Buehler against Montas was not a good pitching matchup yesterday. They both didn't go that deep. Both were walking way too many guys, even though Montas didn't allow any earned runs. He did allow 3 unearned runs. Brewers used 4 relief pitchers, and the Dodgers also used 4 relief pitchers. in that game. So a lot of bullpen usage, pretty decent amount of bullpen usage. I still do like the under here, but the bullpen usage kind of keeps me off of it a little bit. I could see this going a little bit sideways later in the game. I definitely like the starting pitching matchup here. I would probably consider playing under 4 in the first 5 innings if I wanted to play the under here. The game I'm actually going to be on is, it feels wrong, but I'm laying a pretty pricey road public favorite here, and that's going to be the Seattle Mariners. Even though the Mariners, you tend to want to play them at home, especially with Bryce Miller pitching. He's much better at home, but I'll explain why I still do kind of want to play him in this one here. The Mariners look like they're down from minus 150 to minus 145 here as a road favorite, but the odds makers are telling you something with them priced as such a heavy road favorite, even though it doesn't appear. That makes it appear like there isn't really that much value there, especially after Seattle lost the first 2 games of the series to Detroit. But the odds makers are kind of telling you that this has to be like a pretty big mismatch here for Seattle to be that priced like that pricey on the road. 72% of the tickets are still coming in on Seattle, though. It looks like the line has dropped a little on Seattle, but I also see 82% of the cash right now, according to pregame's numbers, on Seattle. So it looks like they might have more of the cash than the tickets on them. It's hard to say, but I'm just playing this because I do think it's a mismatch motivationally and with the starting pitcher. And I like it, even though it is going to mean laying a Seattle run line on the road in this one. That is what I'm going to do here. Seems a little dangerous, but I have a feeling Seattle can't really be that overpriced after Detroit has beaten them the first 2 games of the series and beat them 15-1 in the first game of the series in what was a bad situational spot, really, as I mentioned on this channel, a return home spot. But it was Skubal pitching for Detroit, and he had another really good start. Not surprising, really. Mariners got a pretty bad start out of Kirby. Maybe he wasn't ready for it because they didn't know who their starter was going to be until pretty late. I think they decided that day. Still, Kirby is a much better pitcher than what he did in that game. That was just a horrific start from Kirby, mostly because he allowed 3 home runs. He just allowed way too many hits. He got lit up. Then Seattle played a better game yesterday with Wu putting in another really good pitching performance. Wu has been very good. I talk about him on the channel a lot. He is definitely a good pitcher, and he had them in line to win the game. They were winning 2-0, I think, late in the game, and they blew the game, allowed Detroit to tie it, and then let Detroit beat them in extra innings. Just a brutal loss for Seattle, but I think that Seattle's not going to be hung over from that. I think, if anything, Detroit might come into this game a little bit in kind of letdown mode here, because Detroit, they don't have that much to play for left this season, man. I mean, I don't think they think they're going to make the playoffs at this point. They're below 500. I think they're 14 games back in their division. I think they know they're not going to do anything. They were sellers to some extent at the All-Star break. As I mentioned, they did trade away Flaherty to the Dodgers, which I just mentioned. Interesting that he's pitching today in a day that I'm talking about Detroit, but just coincidental, I suppose. Detroit hasn't really lost their motivation, seemingly. They've been playing hard in the series, obviously, for sure, in front of the home crowd. But I think this may be where it comes to an end, man, because of the dramatic win yesterday, the way that they won that game last night. I think they could be actually in letdown mode here because, hey, we just beat one of the playoff contending teams here in Seattle. And look at who Detroit has next, I think tomorrow. I don't know if they don't have the day off because it's a Friday. Thursday is when teams get the day off in baseball, Monday and Thursday. So Detroit is playing tomorrow, and they start a series against the New York Yankees. So Detroit has just beaten Seattle twice, so they've already won this series. They don't really have that much left to play for. Hey, they already beat one of the contenders in the AL West. They could already be looking ahead potentially to facing one of the major contenders in the AL, one of the top teams in the AL East up next in the New York Yankees. Detroit could overlook Seattle in this last game, man, thinking, hey, we have Seattle's number here. This has been a good series for us. That might be the case. And looking at the bullpen usage yesterday, Detroit went with an opener approach yesterday. And I know the whole thing about the opener approach was a thing that I think was started by Tampa with, was it Joe Madden? I don't know. It was one of their crazy managers a few years back who started doing it, who was just like, we're going to go with this opener approach and just roll out relief pitcher after relief pitcher, basically jar the offense and keep them on their toes so they can't get used to any particular pitcher because they have to face a different pitcher over and over and over again, which works to some extent, but at some point, man, you use too many of your relievers and you don't have enough left in the tank. And I think that's going to be what happens with the Tigers here, because they went with the bullpen approach last night after they really didn't use much of their bullpen at all in that School Bowl game. They only used one relief pitcher. Okay, fine. But the Mariners yesterday were able to save more of their bullpen yesterday. They used 3 relief pitchers. Granted, it was some of their better pitchers in a close game, but Wu went deep into the game. Detroit went with the opener approach with Brisky. I don't know how to pronounce it. Brisket. I like me some of that brisket, man. Some smoked brisket. Detroit went with Brisky, and then they used 5 relief pitchers beyond him, but they used Salmons for basically a starter's workload, then 4 more relievers. So either way you look at it, they used more of their relievers than the Mariners did yesterday. And then coming into today's game, Detroit is going with an opener approach again today. So I know the whole thing, the adage, basically, the teams that do the opener approach, it can work, but then it also tends to work well in the next game. For whatever reason, it's like they kind of saved like their better relievers. I don't understand really how that even works, because it seems to me like in the opener approach, you use a bunch of your relievers and don't have as many of them left in the next game. I don't know, but it is kind of counterintuitive. In the next game, the team that went with the opener approach in the previous game tends to do well in the next game, and that is what Detroit is doing here. But look at what Detroit is doing today, man. They're going with another opener approach today with Alex Faedo pitching. You look at what this guy's done. He hasn't gone more than 2 innings in any appearance this year. I don't think 2 1/3. Maybe he did one time. So he is an opener as well. I think there's no way around that he's only going to be an opener in this one, which means Detroit's going to be going into their bullpen early again after doing it last night. So I think Detroit's going to run out of relief pitchers, man. And their bullpen isn't that good. So it doesn't look like a good spot to me for Detroit here, just with the bullpen usage, even though, yeah, it might keep Seattle's hitters on their toes a little bit because they won't know who's coming up next and who they're going to have to face. But like I said, Detroit's bullpen is not that intimidating. And the fact that they're going to be going with 2 bullpen games in a row, it doesn't seem good to me. I think maybe at this point they just don't really have another option. So Faedo is going to be out there for probably a couple of innings. He's got a 3.62 ERA this year, which looks fine, but a 1.3 whip is a little bit high. And you look at his other stats, and they're kind of indicative that he walks too many guys. He's got a 53-23 strikeout walk ratio, and he's allowed 9 home runs and 54 2/3 innings pitched. So it's kind of a lot of home runs, and there's way too many walks. That amount of walks is significantly high. That's not good. It's a decent strikeout rate, but the walk rate is just so high. And he's allowed 48 hits, which isn't many either. So he's not that easy to hit, but that walk rate, man, he's putting way too many men on base via the free pass. In the month of August, in 2 2/3 innings pitched over 2 appearances, he has 4 walks and 4 strikeouts. So again, he's walking too many guys. His walk ratio in the month of July was 18-17 was the strikeout walk ratio, I think. Is that right? Oh, no, I'm looking at ground balls again. Stupid ESPN. No, it was 17-6. That's not as bad. ESPN is showing me the columns like don't align. When you look at 1 month to the other, the columns shift. I don't know what it is. Come on, ESPN. Fix your tables, man. Get some better UI going on here. But either way, Faedo walks too many guys. He does have decent numbers against the Mariners, but it's in a bit limited of a sample size. He has held them to a 4 for 20 clip, 1 double, no other extra base hits, 1 RBI, 9-2 strikeout walk ratio, 200 batting average, and 523 OPS. So Seattle's hitters, they're not great in general, but they haven't done well against Faedo. But like I said, Faedo's only going to be in there for probably 2 innings, I would guess, at most. So I don't think that his stats against Seattle really matter that much in the long run here in a game like this, whereas I think you're going to get a deeper performance out of Bryce Miller, who's pitching for Seattle, and he's a legit starter, obviously, and he's got good numbers this season, 3.46 ERA, 1.03 whip. I'm going to be on Bryce Miller 2 games in a row. I was on him in the previous game against the Mets at home. I liked that spot. Bryce Miller is way better at home, though, but I'll get to that in a minute. So that is a little bit concerning, but I'll talk about why I don't think it's as concerning in this specific game. But Miller is coming off a good game against a pretty good Mets team, but he's just been really consistent overall, man. You have to go back to June 23rd to find a bad start from him where he allowed 6 earned runs against Miami for whatever reason, where maybe he just wasn't focused. Since that game, he's allowed 4 or fewer earned runs in all the other starts. The 4 was a kind of bad start against Philadelphia in his second to last start, which I don't know if you can really blame him for that. And other than that, he allowed 3 earned runs against the White Sox. So again, seems like he may be a little bit unfocused against some of these worse offenses, and he tends to step up against better offenses, but Detroit is one of the worst offenses too. But still, I think overall we're just looking at a good pitcher, man, who's been pretty consistent, except he didn't have a good month of May. Other than that, he's been pretty good, I would say. May and June, actually June, he had a little bit, he struggled a little bit just because of those 2 bad starts against Miami and Kansas City. Other than that, he's been quite good. He's got 119 strikeouts and 31 walks this season. That's a good strikeout walk rate. 106 hits allowed, 16 home runs allowed. It's a little bit high, but 132 and 2/3 innings pitched. That's a low hit rate. Pretty good strikeout walk ratio, even though his strikeout rate isn't very high, but he doesn't walk that many guys. His command is pretty good. He pitched well in his last start, which I don't think he's going to be a letdown spot after that. I think that might help carry some momentum into this. And I think Seattle's going to be pissed, man, after the way they lost last night. I don't think it's going to be a hangover spot, even though it was a dramatic finish. I think Detroit's going to be in more of the letdown spot just because they could be over-celebrating a little bit for beating one of the better teams in the American League again with the Yankees up next. Of course, like I said, it almost makes this kind of like a sandwich spot where we talk about sandwich spots in a lot of these other sports. We don't talk about it much in baseball because baseball is series by series. But it could be here after beating Seattle and clinching the series against Seattle with a big series against the Yankees up next. It's possible it's a sandwich for Detroit here. And Seattle has reason to be focused here. Miller has reason to be focused here because they don't want to get swept, man. They're still a contender here. They're still fighting in the NL West here, fighting for a playoff spot. They don't want to get swept by a Detroit team that's below 500, man. So Seattle, I think they're going to be in more of the mode where we just lost a game we shouldn't have lost. We had the game in hand. We know we did. We blew it. We know we're the better team here. Let's get this done. I think that's going to be more the sentiment for Seattle here. And Bryce Miller against Detroit has really good numbers over his career. It's another smallish sample size, but he's held them to a 4-for-23 clip. One double, no other extra base hits, 4-to-1 strikeout walk ratio. So he's held them to a 174 average and 426 OPS. So those numbers are even better than Faedo's against Seattle. And Miller is obviously going to, maybe I shouldn't say obviously because anything could happen and maybe I'll jinx it, but Miller is the one who should be going much deeper into this game because Faedo is going to be the opener and that's it. I would expect Miller is going to be in that game after Faedo is out of there. And Miller, the better pitcher, the actual starter, was Faedo's the opener type of guy. And we get Seattle's bullpen, which I think is a little bit more rested after yesterday. And I think Seattle actually has the better of the two bullpens. So Detroit just not a very impressive team in general. So I like all that. And then, as I was alluding to, Bryce Miller does have bad numbers on the road, significantly bad home road splits. His home ERA is like 2-something, and his road ERA is in the 5s. So what am I doing here? I'm playing Bryce Miller on the road. I played him at home last time, which is a much better spot to play him. Yeah, that's true. That's for sure. But look at what we got here. His good numbers against Detroit. Detroit is not that familiar with him. They saw him once last year, I believe. And other than that, I don't think they've seen him much at all. Maybe they faced him one other time, but I know they faced him once last year. Well, maybe they faced him multiple times last year, but I was only looking at games in Detroit specifically last year. And Bryce Miller did pitch once in Detroit last year. That's his only game he's ever pitched in Comerica Park. And he has a 0 ERA there. He went 7 innings shutout, allowed 3 runs. And I think he only had 3 strikeouts and no walks or something like that. But he kept them basically completely off the board. A 7-inning, 3-hit shutout performance. So he pitched pretty well in Detroit. And this is a similar Detroit team this year, at least. So that gives me less pause on playing Miller in a road game here because he's facing a team that he has done well in limited history, but he's done well against them, and he's in a stadium where he has one start where he did do well. So some of these other road starts could be getting to him more. So this one, I don't think is as dangerous. So I'm going to do it. I like everything that I just said. I like it. I think Detroit's bullpen is going to kind of run out of steam just because they have 2 bullpen games in a row and they don't have a very good bullpen. I think Seattle does have the better bullpen. I think offensively, Detroit probably has a slightly better offense, but neither of these teams hit that well. And Miller is the better starter and the one who's going to go deeper into this game and get you more innings here and get you deeper into the game. And hopefully you'll be winning the game at that point as well. So I like all of that. So that's going to be the play, man. It's a full game play. Seattle Mariners -1.5 run line. You can get it at, I think, +110 right now or something like that. That's the only play today. I'm on a 10-1-1 run, man, and let's not lose it. I could have extended it last night if I played Philly. I did like it. Knowing my luck, I'm going to lose on Seattle today, and the under is going to get there in Milwaukee and the Dodgers. But that is it. Seattle -1.5 run line. Avoid the sweep, baby. Let's avoid breaking the streak, too, hopefully. Have a good one. Peace. Oh, actually, before I get out of here, because I do tend to comment on NFL preseason. I mean, I don't play the preseason, really. There is one game in the NFL. I don't know how much we care about Eagles, Patriots. I mean, the Eagles, I think, should have kind of a bounce back this season after just a horrific end to last season. They're not as bad as they looked at the end of last season. Maybe they're not as good as the hype train was earlier in the season on the Eagles or as it was the previous season, but they're somewhere in the middle. They're better than the way they finished last year, but this is preseason. Patriots have flipped from a 2.5 underdog to a 2.5 favorite. I believe this is at New England. I believe this is in Foxborough. They're listed as the home team. I think it is in New England. But even though the line looks like it's flipped, I mean, I think the 2.5 opener for Philly was probably long ago. And Patriots probably just flipped after we saw like what the personnel was going to be and stuff. So I think the cash to ticket disparity is actually the better indicator in a game like this where the line has been out for forever. I don't think you can put as much stock into the line flipping from Patriots being a dog to a favorite. But we see tickets evenly split 50%, but 61% of the cash on the Eagles. So I would trust the cash percentage more in this one and actually lean a little bit to the Eagles here. And I think the Eagles do have the more experienced like quarterback depth there, like the more experienced. I think they're more experienced at the quarterback position. They do have Kenny Pickett, and I forget who else they have. I think they have one other guy who's got some NFL experience under his belt. As the Patriots have, I think, at least two guys who really don't have a whole lot of experience. But I mean, I'd rather be on Kenny Pickett than Bailey Zappi. Let's just put it that way. In a game like this, if it comes down to that matchup being a significant portion of this game. So I think it could be the Eagles would be the way to look here, but I'm not going to have anything to do with it. But that's going to do it, man. Seattle Mariners, -1.5 run line, +110 or whatever you can get. I think you can still get it at plus money. Peace.